Order of the day number 17, House of Assembly Restoration Bill, second reading.
Thank you, Mr Connell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can indicate that a vote will be required. I move, Madam Speaker, that the House of Assembly Restoration Bill 2018 now be read for a second time. Discussion around reducing seats in the Tasmanian Parliament began in 1983. The same year, Bob Brown entered Parliament on a countback following the resignation of Democrats MP Norm Sanders. No irony there, Madam Speaker, but the Greens in this place have been an uncomfortable truth for the major parties since the first day we arrived in here. In 1983, Liberal Premier Robin Gray established an advisory committee which reported the next year. The Ogilvie report recommended against any reduction in the size of the Tasmanian Parliament. The issue was again raised in 1993 following the breakdown of the 1989 Labor-Green Accord in 1992. Liberal Premier Ray Groom introduced a pair of linked measures, a reduction in the House of Assembly from 35 to 30 members and a 40% salary increase for the remaining MPs. These issues were untied during the parliamentary process and only the 40% pay rise was passed into law. Following this, in 1994, Premier Groom established a board of inquiry into the size of the Tasmanian Parliament, which reported in June 1994. The Morling report again recommended against any reduction in the size of the Tasmanian House of Assembly. The issue was again raised in 1997, Madam Speaker, 1 year into the Liberal-Green minority arrangement, with a defeated proposal for a referendum to reduce the size of Parliament by removing a lower house electorate and reducing the size of the Legislative Council to 16. Madam Speaker, several models were floated after this point between the Liberals, ALP and Legislative Council, and eventually in 1998, the Parliament took the politically motivated and ill-advised move of reducing the numbers in the House of Assembly from 35 to 25 and the Legislative Council from 19 to 15. Madam Speaker, the timing of all these proposals very clearly corresponds to periods when the Greens were at the height of their influence. To this day, this reform is used as an example of political collusion in political science courses. Labor and the Liberals colluded to reduce the size of Parliament in order to try to eliminate the Greens. In fact, during the debate in 1998, the late Liberal MP, Michael Hodgman, made no secret that it was his most sincere wish that the Greens be eliminated. This move, as demonstrated by the fact that Dr Woodruff and I are in this place and I'm standing here now reading this speech, didn't work. And another balance of power parliament was elected in 2010. In 2010, all three political leaders committed to restoring the House of Assembly, including now Premier and then Opposition Leader Will Hodgman. It was claimed to be the effects of the global financial crisis on Tasmania's budget that saw the Liberals, then Labor, walk away from their commitment to the Tasmanian people and a more robust democracy. The policy backdown was also defended by pointing out that Tasmania had more politicians per capita than any other Australian state. It was quite rightly pointed out by a range of academics at the time that that is not the only relevant measure. A minimum number of elected representatives are required in order to provide for an effective executive government, a larger pool of talent for ministries and effective backbench to field committees. These failings have all proven to be based in reality in recent times. In 2017, in an unprecedented move, the then Speaker had to be pulled from the chair to fill a vacant ministerial position. And more recently, the government had only one backbench member in two budget estimates committees, and that was, of course, the member for Lyons, Mr Hiddings. Due to these factors, we thought some more sophisticated comparative orders and a per capita assessment were required. We examined the numbers in all state or state equivalent parliaments in federal countries globally. In this research, Tasmania's lower house does not perform well, with the average size of a lower house for states with a population between 400,000 and 600,000, like Tasmania's, sitting at 45 members. Of the 75 bicameral parliaments across the globe, Tasmania has the third smallest lower house, beaten only by two states in the United States of America, the Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa. These states have lower houses of 20 and 21 seats respectively, and populations of 53,883 and 55,519. Thereabouts, respectively. Tasmania also has the seventh smallest combined legislature of the 75 bicameral parliaments. The six smaller legislatures include again Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa, Chuuk, with a population of 54,595 in the Federated States of Micronesia, as well as three states in Argentina, La Rioja, with a population of 380,220, San Luis, with a population of 495,629, and Corrientes, the only bicameral state in the world to have a smaller combined legislature than us, with a higher population at 1 million, bit over 1 million. Looking at both bicameral lower houses and unicameral parliaments, Tasmania has the 85th smallest out of 574 states. Of the 84 parliaments smaller than ours, the Economist Intelligence Unit only classifies 3 as full democracies: Yukon, Northwest Territories and Nunavut. All of these are Canadian states and have populations under 50,000. Of the rest, 18 are flawed democracies, 12 are hybrid regimes, 32 are authoritarian regimes, and 19... Did you just hear an authoritarian regime?
He did. No.
He did.
No, I was talking to Jeremy.
Okay. Of the rest, 18 are flawed democracies, 12 are hybrid regimes, 32 are authoritarian regimes, and 19 are unclassified due to being microstates. Of the 72 fully democratic states, our lower house is ranked 69th in size, only larger than the 3 aforementioned Canadian states with populations under 50,000, and tied with the Northern Territory and ACT here in Australia, which both have smaller populations. Madam Speaker, it's also worth noting that Australian states have more responsibilities than average state equivalents in federal models of government. In addition, Australia's constitution provides for one of the most extensive models of concurrent responsibility in the world. This means that there are fewer areas where the state has no responsibility than in many other federal countries, increasing the number of ministries required for effective administration. The bottom line, Madam Speaker, is that by any measure, our parliament is a very small one. It should also be noted that even should we restore the numbers to 35, we will still be 10 seats short of the average size for state parliaments in our population range. So this can hardly be argued to be too large. The voices calling for the restoration of seats are numerous and diverse. After the 2018 election, federal politicians from all three parties, Liberal Senator Eric Abetz, Greens Senator Nick McKim and Federal Labor MP Julie Collins, called for reforms to see an improved pool of talent for ministries, with Senators Abetz and McKim, in a rare unity ticket, calling specifically for a restoration of seats. Voices in the Legislative Council, Madam Speaker, have also called for a restoration of seats. This includes experienced legislators, President Jim Wilkinson and former member of the Legislative Council, Greg Hall. Mr Wilkinson has stated, quote, "I don't think Parliament has worked as well as it did prior to 1998. Referring to the size of the House of Assembly, Greg Hall raised the question, can a government team of at least 13 sufficiently run a cabinet, parliament, and dedicate time to committee and constituent work? Can an opposition sufficiently hold the government of the day to account? As the House of Review, the Legislative Council has some insight into both parliamentary and executive dysfunction. Constitutional Society President Peter Chapman, award-winning political journalist Wayne Crawford, historian Reg Watson, Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Chief Executive Michael Bailey, corporate governance lecturer Tom Baxter and political analyst Richard Hare have all voiced support for the restoration of numbers, as has, most recently, the House of Assembly's Speaker Sue Hickey. In the 2005 journal article in the Australasian Parliamentary Review, Richard Hare described the reduction in the seats in 1998 this way. The Liberal Party and Australian Labor Party combined in a bipartisan assault on the Parliament itself in a misguided attempt to decrease probability of any future minority government. The stratagem the two parties adopted reduced the size of the Parliament to a level that they expected would prevent third parties from holding a balance of power on the floor of the Assembly. This action has totally distorted the relationship between Parliament and government to such an extent that it is arguable the Westminster tradition itself is in jeopardy. There's another line from the article which is still relevant today. Mr Hare says, despite a great deal of sophistry about cost savings and the like, the driving force behind the change was an irresistible urge to secure majority party control of the government by raising the electoral threshold for the Greens to an unachievable level. End quote. In a climate where the overwhelming voice of commentators is in support of the restoration of numbers, this argument is still the only one being put forward as an objection. Sophistry is an accurate description. We know, Madam Speaker, that the impacts of the global financial crisis, which was the rationale for the abandonment of the 2010 commitment, have now subsided. A 40% increase in House of Assembly costs equates to roughly $3.7 million on 2018-19 costs. This financial year, the combined total cost of the ministerial and parliamentary support output and the House of Assembly output in the state budget increased by $3.37 million. Madam Speaker, $700,000 of these costs are additional funding provided to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition and the Leader of the Tasmanian Greens. The increase in operational funding for elected officers of members of the House of Assembly and funding for increased lease costs for new elected officers. Madam Speaker, the rest represents additional funding for a new ministerial office, the support for the Leader of the Government in the Legislative Council and the increased costs of the Ministerial Transport Service. So, Madam Speaker, there's a blithe willingness to spend $3.37 million on increased support for ministers and members of Parliament, a very similar amount to the cost of 10 new seats in the House of Assembly. Madam Speaker, we believe it's foolish to say this is a justifiable expense, yet it is not justifiable to spend a similar amount on improving community representation, increasing access to representatives, increasing the number of ministers to allow greater focus and oversight of portfolios, increasing the number of backbenchers to work in the electorate and staff committees, increasing the capacity of opposition parties to scrutinise government, and increasing the talent pool from which ministers can be drawn. Anyone who argues there is no problem with the current numbers does not have the evidence on their side, or they willfully have their blinkers up, Madam Speaker. As mentioned earlier, last term, the Speaker had to be pulled from the chair to fill a vacant ministerial position. And this term, government had only one backbench member in 2 Budget Estimates Committee. And of course, Madam Speaker, while this provided multiple opportunities for the Greens and indeed Labor to ask more questions of ministers. Ideally, that is not the way a healthy committee operates, where there is only one backbench member between 2 committees. Madam Speaker, since 1998, we've ramped up the role of parliamentary secretaries. Prior to 88, the only parliamentary secretary that the Parliamentary Research Service could find was Liberal MP Bob Cheek, then Liberal MP and former Liberal leader Bob Cheek, in 1996. During the terms after 1998, when the numbers were cut, the Parliament averages 3 parliamentary secretaries per term. It would appear that backbenchers have been increasingly co-opted for portfolio administration, further limiting the time available for quality committees and electoral work. Madam Speaker, many people in this place have made comments in support of the restoration of numbers. The member for Lyons, Mr Hidding, the only member during the 1998 debate still here today, has described this as the worst decision he ever made. Even David Llewellyn admitted it was a mistake in the last term of the Parliament. In 1998, Madam Speaker, both parties indulged in a self-interested attack on the functionality of our Parliament and integrity of our Westminster system. Both parties were willing to undermine our democracy for perceived political gain. The question facing us today is, are they now willing to take a political risk to restore our democracy? Do they have the courage? Madam Speaker, in many ways today is a test of whether or not the Labor or Liberal parties have changed at all in the past 2 decades. We certainly hope so. And Madam Speaker, we will give the parties an opportunity to contribute to a meaningful public conversation about this reform. I move that all the words after that be left out and the following words inserted. 1. A select committee be appointed with power to send for persons and papers and records to inquire into and report upon A. The House of Assembly Restoration Bill 2018, number 55. B. Other matters incidental thereto. 2. The committee shall consist of 6 members, being 3 from the government, nominated by the Leader of the House, one of whom shall be the Speaker of the House. 2 from the opposition, nominated by the Leader of the Opposition, nominated by the Leader of the Opposition, business in the House, and, I think that should say nominated by the Leader of the Opposition. Pardon me, Leader of the Opposition, I'll fix that. And 1 from the Tasmanian Greens, nominated by the Leader of the Tasmanian Greens, whom shall be the Chair. 3, the committee report by 1 August 2019. So, Madam Speaker, what we're doing here today is we're starting the debate on restoring democracy to the House of Assembly and restoring the numbers. And we are providing all parties in this place with the opportunity to examine the bill thoroughly, to seek input from people who are experts, people who are in industry, community sector, Tasmanians more broadly, and to prepare a report back to the Parliament on restoration. And it is my great hope, Madam Speaker, that we can engage in this committee process in the spirit of goodwill and tripartisanship and present a report to the Parliament that is based on the evidence and the testimony of people who've submitted or presented before the committee, and that ultimately this Parliament will undo the damage that was done in 1998 to Tasmania's democracy, and that we will, it is my hope, debate the House of Assembly Restoration Bill 2018 in 2019.
What was the time frame, did you say, Cass?
August.
1 August.
Thank you. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this bill, particularly now given the amendment proposed and to the amendment specifically, and to do so in the context of us all having just been to an election only 8 months or so ago. Yet here we are at this early stage in the new term of government, already debating a bill to increase our House of Assembly.
Restore,
as it may be, our House of Assembly at an election that's not due until 2022. I accept it is indeed a priority for the Greens. It's certainly not a priority issue for the government, and our priorities are clear and well articulated.
we have many priorities, Premier.
And they are the things we are focusing our time and energies on, and they are, of course, principally contained within our plan that we took to the election. That is to keep our economy strong, to create more job opportunities for Tasmanians, to keep our budget in strong shape, to protect against future financial shocks, to ensure that we can invest more into health and into education, into public safety, into infrastructure, into keeping cost of living and cost of business pressures down, and to deliver as best we can on all those commitments we took to the election under a majority Liberal government. But this has been brought to us now by the Greens in the form of this bill. And there is that additional element to the proposal to now establish a select committee to inquire into this matter, which we do support, because it will importantly allow for this matter to be properly canvassed, and in our view it would not have been done so by simply bringing the bill on for resolution today, and it was not something that was canvassed certainly by this party, the government, during the election campaign.
Like gun law changes?
Sorry?
Like changes to gun laws?
Nor do I believe Well, that was.
No, it wasn't.
And it was certainly not
By the Greens.
our position to increase or restore the size of Parliament. So it is not consistent
No,
with
to validate Michael Hodgman over there.
what we took to the election, and that's important. Nor indeed was it canvassed more broadly during the election debate that this might occur
Behave yourself.
or be moved upon so swiftly by any party, perhaps other than the Greens, as has happened. Nor indeed has it properly canvassed the implications of what it might cost to the state, and that is important that those matters be taken into consideration as part of a community consultation that is forecast by the establishment of such a committee, and to allow for those cost implications to be fully understood, and whether or not those costs can be offset in other ways, which I think would also be a point that the Tasmanian community have some interest in.
Options in my second reading speech.
What's that?
You were given some options for offsets in the second reading speech.
And I do believe it would be an issue of interest to our community and indeed the committee to consider such matters, and also to seek input from the community in relation to this. So a committee will allow that to be determined within what is a reasonable time frame, and I welcome the established. Well, you've got some time to play with, as much as I know opposition parties would hope that we might go to an election before 2022. It's not due until then. And that does give sufficient time for this matter to be canvassed by the committee so constituted as the member has outlined, and for these matters and any other relevant to this debate to be considered by that parliamentary committee and reported to in due course. So on that basis, I thank the honourable member for the constructive addition, notwithstanding the fact it will certainly not be a priority of ours. It is a matter that can run its course, and we will look forward to the conclusions of the committee in due course. So on that basis, I can confirm that we will certainly support the amendment to the bill.
Thank you. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to indicate that the Labor Party will be supporting the amendment moved by the Honourable Member for Clark and Ms O'Connor to send this bill to a select committee. We are willing to participate in this process in good faith and look forward to the information that the community of Tasmania is able to share with us. We share some of the concerns made by Ms O'Connor in her contribution, which I have to say was a very thoughtful and considered and well-researched contribution. So I appreciate that speech you gave, Ms O'Connor. We identified some of the problems that exist with the current makeup of the lower house here in Parliament. Obviously, the committee structure isn't operating as effectively as it should be, and I understand the Honourable Member for Lyons, Mr Shelton, is on 8 committees, and that's an awful big workload for somebody to carry.
I seem to remember you were on something like that.
I was also on 8 committees. It's true. Mr Hidding interjects and reminds me that when we were in government 2010 to 14, I was on 8 committees as well. It is a challenge to manage all of that, and it does mean that you are trying to be across a number of different things at once, and I think that does limit your ability to contribute to those committees to the best of your ability. I also identify the obvious challenges as well with the fact the front bench is limited with the number of members in the House because particularly the makeup of this Parliament at the moment and the makeup between 2010 and 2014 as well demonstrated that it can be hard sometimes to put together a front bench and a cabinet that really contains the best talent in the Parliament because of the limited numbers. Madam Speaker, There are also very good arguments to be made for improving our democracy generally, improving good governance in this place, improving access to members of Parliament, ensuring that communities are properly represented in Parliament by restoring the numbers to 35. So I do acknowledge all of the arguments that were made by the Honourable Member, Ms O'Connor. The concerns that we had about the bill being brought forward for debate today were that it is very close to the end of the year, that this is a window of just 1 hour for debate had the bill continued on through the next stages rather than the member for Clark moving the amendment. And I was concerned, as were my colleagues, that it just simply didn't allow the time required to debate an issue as important as this. I acknowledge you've only got an hour for private members' time, Ms O'Connor, so you really don't have a lot of flexibility there. But it's also one of the other reasons we had concern is that given the statements made by members of the government and the Premier that they wouldn't be supporting the bill and they wouldn't be therefore moving to allow more time or even moving their own bill in this place to allow proper debate, that it was going to be truncated and too short, very close to the end of the year and a bit of a rushed process. And I didn't think that was a good outcome for democracy either. Moving to a committee allows for members from all sides of this House to come together, to hear from the experts in this field and to talk with the people of Tasmania about what they want from us. We are elected to represent them. I have no doubt there are some who wish that we didn't exist at all, and that there are too many of us as it stands, and there will be many in the community who think that this is a waste of time and that we should be getting on with other things. But the Parliament is the only place where this can be addressed. Sometimes we have to deal with these matters because there is no other forum where they can be dealt with. So I support the move for a committee. I hope that we're able to come to a consensus report because that will be in the best interest of all of us here and in the interests of the Parliament. I look forward to working constructively with the members who are members on that committee, whoever they may be, and whoever our members may be there as well. But certainly the support and direction that I will give our members on that committee will be to go in with an open mind, to work constructively and to seek a consensus outcome, because I think that will be the best outcome. There would be nothing worse, in my view, than if we had a political division over whether or not to restore to 35, because that would be unnecessary and create division that further demonstrates to the people of Tasmania that their cynical view of politicians is well held. So I look forward to the progress of the committee.
Madam Speaker. Thank you. We have the Honourable Member for Franklin, Dr Woodruff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise with great delight to speak to this bill, which is about restoring the democracy and the good functioning of this House. It is a long time coming, and I think that the experience that we've had in Tasmania since the Parliament was shrunk has, particularly even in this last term and a half, the last term of Parliament, gives us ample evidence of why it is past time to restore the numbers in this House. It is fundamentally a matter of shoring up our democracy and making sure we have the best ability to confront the serious and difficult issues that ministers are required to make decisions around. I think when I think of the debates that we've had in this place in just very recent times, the issues that are confronting the health system, the work of the emergency services in preparing for ever-increasing climate threats, the extreme pressures in so many parts of society, from housing to the need for so much better support for teachers in education. All of these issues are huge and pressing, and I haven't even started on dealing with climate change, Madam Speaker. We know that of all the issues sitting there for us, for ministers to attend to, that crosses every portfolio. And what is very abundantly clear from all the debates that we have in this place is that minister after minister in portfolio after portfolio does not prioritise, for whatever reason, does not prioritise planning for climate change in Tasmania. That is such critical work. But it is pretty clear that when a minister is responsible for 3, 4 or 5 weighty portfolios, those sort of heavy, future-thinking, propositional and complicated cross-department issues are just never going to rise above the day-to-day work that has to be done. In order for a minister to have the space in their mind and to demand the time of the people who they are responsible for leading and directing, to demand that they prioritise these huge issues, that there needs to be space in a person's day to do that work. There are physical limitations to what a single person can do. And so this is a question of being past time to shore up this part of the functioning of government. And I think anyone who has been waiting in an emergency department, trying to get their child access to specialised education, trying to understand the best way to protect their small community in an extreme bushfire situation in the coming summer, all of those people in the community would really appreciate that they have a minister who is really attending, fully able to attend to the issues in his or her portfolio. So this is, on a very simple level, about creating some space for ministers to have time to do their jobs properly. And we also have an issue of quality, and that's not to be in any way belittling of any members in the House at the moment. But the facts are, it takes time to acquire the life experience to be able to be a good minister. Not everybody comes into this place and is elected to the role to be a minister. It is not, either it is not in their functional skill set or it's not their life experience to take on that role, or they simply haven't been in Parliament for long enough to understand how to do that work effectively. And what we've seen in this last, since 2014 when the Liberals took government, we've seen a dilution of experience amongst elected members who are capable of taking on ministerial roles. Let's not forget that Paul Harris was a member in the House. Paul Harris was a member who'd been in government, I don't know how long, but many, many years in different roles. He had much experience at different levels, and like his approach or not, you would have to say, in the case of the Greens, you'd have to say he had expertise and therefore some native ability to be able to take on aspects of that role. Of course, we I'm not particularly sorry to see that particular person not here in government, but the fact is, then who moved? We've also had Matthew Groom resign from Parliament in the last term. Also a person who I'm not particularly sorry to see to see him gone from this place, the way he mismanaged the environment, was difficult to watch. But he definitely had credibility as a person with experience and ability to be able to take on the role as a minister. So we've had 2 people gone from the Liberals in the last term of government. We've also had a minister who may have been who may have had the skills to be a minister, but was required to stand down. Mr. Brooks. We've also had a minister who was dismissed temporarily, Ms. Courtney, and moved to another area, another ministerial portfolio. So what we're seeing is that there's precious few resources on the Liberal side of house to be able to do the work of being effective ministers. I don't think I need to say any more. The evidence stands for itself. We need more people in this place, and given the distances in Tasmania and the responsibilities to attend to the needs of constituents, it would be a great benefit to people in Tasmania, whether they are personally aware of that or not, but it would certainly provide them with more skills and expertise and more access to members to present their case and fundamentally to get a better outcome for Tasmania. So, Madam Speaker, I was a little surprised at the brevity of the speeches from the Premier and from the Leader of the Opposition. I was expecting something a little bit more substantial, and it's clear that we've still got some reluctance to jump into this space, and I would expect that the process of the committee will give both the Liberal and the Labor parties the opportunity to understand the evidence for the value of restoring the numbers in Tasmania in the lower house to 35, and I look forward to the work of that committee, and expect the findings of that committee will come in with the accumulation of knowledge and evidence that we have, which is it will be a huge benefit to the governance in Tasmania to restore the numbers in this house.
Thank you. Leader of the Greens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank all who've contributed to this debate. I reiterate Dr Woodruff's concern about the brevity of the contributions from the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition, but I understand the level of caution around this issue. No, I understand the level of caution around this issue, and what we're dealing with here has been, let's be honest, a game of chicken between the two major parties in this place, neither one wanting to jump first, even though I reckon if you did a spot poll of every member of this House, we would all agree that the House needs to be restored, Madam Speaker. Now, I take on board what the Leader of Opposition said about that this private member's time was not enough time to debate the bill. Absolutely, couldn't agree more with you, Ms White. But there were options available to the House to extend the time for the debate, and we would have liked to see those options being exercised. But because we are the Greens, want this to be a cooperative, collaborative process, we believe, as the Leader of the Opposition said, that there needs to be a measure of consensus about this. We've been prepared to move our position to support the establishment of a committee. Now, in our original thoughts on what the committee might look like, we were proposing that there be 2 government members, 2 opposition members and 1 Green member, and so through a process of discussion and negotiation with the government side, we've agreed that there be 3 Liberal members of the committee, 2 Labor members of the committee and 1 Green, and that I will chair, and I give this undertaking to the House that I will be a fair, impartial chair and seek to be inclusive, inquisitive, reasonable. Oh no! Kumbaya.
Oh, not all that stuff.
Kumbaya, yeah. Kumbaya committee.
Where we have to sing and all that?
Chair, I only hold hands at the beginning of each committee meeting.
Till the hot tub warmed up.
And Madam Speaker, I'm determined that this is a really constructive process. And now that we've moved to the point where we're agreeing that that the Parliament, that the House of Assembly should inquire into the bill and seek evidence, I think it's something we should all look forward to. Hearing from advocates for restoration, hearing the voice of Tasmanians from all walks of life, being prepared to have people sit across the evidence table and tell us the last thing Tasmania needs is more politicians. And we will hear that, Madam Speaker, because arguing for more politicians is a very hard sell, Madam Speaker. Let's face it, because we're all tarred with the dirty brush when people are thinking about politicians. Very rarely in the public do people make any distinction between one colour of politician or another, much to the Greens' chagrin every now and again, Madam Speaker. So we look forward to this committee process. I, for example, would love to hear, I was talking to Mr Hitting about this yesterday, love to hear from former Premier Tony Rundle. He can come in here and again try to justify what they did in 1998, and I also want to hear from former Greens leader Christine Milne, who was part of that as well. We need to be inclusive.
He wasn't all
here.
that happy about it.
Shock. No. And in fact, I've spoken to Christine about the events of 1998, and it is fair to say, Madam Speaker, they have left a scar on her. The shrinking of the Parliament, the shafting of the Greens, it left a scar on Christine. It's fair to say. But it's been, I want, for example, for us to hear from the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Let's get Saul Eslake in, economist. Let's hear from Greg Hall, who, after we tabled the restoration bill in the last sitting, actually got in touch with me by email to say, good on you, well done. The Tasmanian House of Assembly needs to be restored. And apologies, Greg, if I've paraphrased you somewhat loosely, but that was the gist of it, Madam Speaker. I do also want to acknowledge that it's been a pleasant surprise to see the way the Mercury newspaper has editorialised on this issue, and that's because the editor and political journalists who sit up in this place each day as observers of the Tasmanian Parliament, they can see what the problem is. And we can all see what the problem is, Madam Speaker. The Premier knew what the problem was when he was trying to put his cabinet together after the election, and to have so few choices as the Premier of the day, it would be frustrating and it would be disappointing. And I think, Mr Hodgman, it should be a priority to have the best quality people to choose from for a cabinet. Mr Yench, what?
So few choices, but so good.
Sorry, one more?
Such good ones.
Such good ministers?
Such good ones. Such good choices.
Okay. Yes, but, okay, if we just take that at face value, what happens? What happens if for whatever reason, because life is complicated, fragile, precarious, politics is a dog's game, what happens the next time a minister is unable to do their job or a minister falls? That puts the Premier of the day in a terrible bind. No, it doesn't? Oh, there you are, Mr Hidding, sorry.
No, well, the Labor have the same issues.
Labor did have the same issues, and there were the first two Greens
We
ministers.
know where they went.
The first two Greens ministers in the country.
Bench.
But when you have a look back at that period between 2010 and 2014, again, even though it was a power-sharing parliament,
They looked at Brent Best and ended up going to the Greens.
yeah, well, I think that the Premier of the day had some quality choices in the Greens, and it was a great honour to serve as a minister in the Bartlett and Giddings governments, an enormous honour and a privilege. But yes, imagine if the only choice the Premier of the day had at that time was Brenton Best.
Now, see, what you're doing now, you're doing the work of the committee now. No, don't. You're right. I can see what's going on here. You've got some.
No, well, I'm just having a chat and talking about things because, I'll be really honest with you, I thought that we might have more substantive contributions from the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the nature of an inquiry is that the substantive work happens in there. You don't stand up. You don't stand up and make all your contributions now, because actually you'd say, well, what do we need an inquiry for? You know, so.
Sure, but there's a set. Thank you, Mr. Hidding. But there's a set of principles here about democracy, good governance, quality of the talent pool. There's a set of principles here that I would have thought we'd all agree on. Well, whether or not you have a position on this particular piece of legislation.
Haven't we just?
Well, well, maybe. I hope so. So, Madam Speaker, I do look forward to being part of the committee. I'll just quote here from. In fact, I'll finish off, Madam Speaker, with a quote from your recent article in the Examiner newspaper, and it pointed to. Okay. It is humanly impossible, quote, Madam Speaker, Tasmania is suffering from the smaller parliament and the onerous workloads of ministers, one of whom has 6 portfolios. It is humanly impossible to represent your community at functions, meeting with constituents, and then to do the required reading to be fully across your portfolio without the help of the unelected and well-paid bureaucracy, who've become the true influencers of public policy. Portfolios of the size, complexity, importance, and which literally affect the lives of Tasmanians, such as health, should have one dedicated minister. It is a huge and complex portfolio. This article continues, yet we expect our health minister to be the leader of the House for Government Business, Minister of Police, Fire and Emergency Management, and Minister for Science and Technology. Now, Madam Speaker, I have seen the pictures of Mr Ferguson in his Superman outfit, and clearly...
It's not
Tell me it's not like that. No, truly, have you not seen the picture?
Yeah, the T-shirt.
The T-shirt? Well, that's because he was rescuing the royal. But while Mr Ferguson obviously has many talents and capacities, it is simply not possible, humanly possible, to be the best health minister and carry those other workloads. And I hope Mr Ferguson, when we come back to debate the bill, looks forward to it as an opportunity not to have to carry such an onerous workload should he be re-elected after 2022, should there be another Liberal government after 2022, and should Mr Ferguson want to continue in the health portfolio, Madam Speaker. Now, of course, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. Mr O'Byrne, are you okay?
No, sorry,
Just having a little cough and splutter over there?
The water was particularly cold. So.
Shall I call the Health Minister to give you a hand? No?
Last person,
Okay.
I don't want to get rammed, so I'm fine. I'll walk my way up there.
You walk your way up there. So, Madam Speaker, looking forward to the committee. We'll get cracking pretty quickly, and I do commend the bill to the House, but obviously we've moved past the second reading stage, and this is the end of the debate.
Thank you. So the time for debate has expired. The question is that the amendment will... the question is that the amendment be approved. All those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Those to the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Then the question is that the bill be read for as amended. No, the motion. Okay, the question is that the motion as amended be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it.